Do you have the documents and is that legal? To which I said yes, and the guy was like, okay, off you go. From the moment that I first ever saw the new Ford GT, I instantly fell in love with the car and hoped it was going to be possible to one day acquire one and hopefully do many adventures and build up many memories with it down the line. Little did I know at the time how the process would run. I'd been there at the launch of the car originally and at Le Mans as well when they were introducing the racing car. But at that stage, we didn't know the cost, we didn't know the availability, we knew it was going to be a rare car and hard to get a hold of. And I was lucky to go down the line and to secure an allocation for a Ford GT. And as I think Ford hoped, I was determined that I would use the car to the maximum, to the fullest. And that would include bringing it over to the United States of America, having flown the car from the UK to go through a multiple-month road trip around the entire country. However, the problem that presented is how do you go on a road trip with a car that when you have two occupants, you don't have any luggage space anywhere to store anything. I know it's the first worldest of first world problems, but it's quite an interesting thing to understand a little bit more about, and some of the planning about how we put together this trip to go everywhere from Times Square, New York, to Ocean Drive, Miami, to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, Rodeo Drive, Los Angeles, and take the car pretty much around the entire country, covering the supercar scene of the United States, one of the best trips of my life, something I'll never forget that I did, especially that first moment I went around to the cargo terminal at JFK, and there was my car with its British license plate sitting ready and raring to go for the trip ahead. The Ford GT is of course a car that is built first and foremost for racing. It's the road-going derivative of the racing car. They effectively built the racing car first, the road car followed, the opposite way around to most manufacturers taking part in that space. The result of that is that it's fantastic to drive, a brilliant experience when being driven in anger on a racetrack, but they weren't really considering practicality. From things like storage bins inside the cabin and where you could even put your mobile phone or your drinks, all the way through to any luggage space. Now it does run the controversial, fairly small engine, the 3.5-litre twin-turbocharged V6, as opposed to the larger V8 lumps found in the previous generation of the GT, which means you have a very small compartment going on at the back of the engine space underneath the rear hatch, a space that not only is big enough for about a wash bag and a pair of shoes, but also gets very, very, very hot. We're talking about a car with over 650 horsepower from a small engine, twin-turboed. It gets warm back there, so the last thing you want to do is put anything you care about in that luggage space, which means you're limited to what you have in the cabin. We're again talking about a cabin with very compact dimensions. You're sitting right alongside your passenger, in fact, basically brushing shoulders. All of the cars are left-hand drive, so even my UK car, where normally it'd be right-hand drive, is a left-hand drive car. But outside of that, you don't have anywhere in the footwell. The passenger footwell is actually taken up by a part of the crash structure, so even the passenger's legs don't really have room to fully extend. You've got a tiny little compartment tray underneath your legs in the driving seat, and a small little rubber mat sitting just underneath the infotainment, but you're not really going to fit anything there. So if you want to go on a drive, taking somebody with you, you can't even fit a small laptop bag. Maybe a handbag or something like that, but you're not going to be taking your clothes for multiple months. You're not going to be taking all of your chargers and whatever you might need, and you're not going to be taking all of your camera gear that you might want to be making videos and photos and things as you travel. So from the very outset, this was a case of how am I going to do this? How am I going to take my car all around the country without being able to actually use it? And for one or two legs, I planned ahead and I made sure that I was able to drive on my own and I could fill the passenger seat with my luggage, or we could arrange for somebody to join us with another car to take some luggage. But obviously, even if you're traveling light, when you're talking multiple months, whatever you do, you've got reasonable amounts of stuff. And I tend to travel very, very light. I've been doing this for quite a while and spending a lot of time up in the air and on the move, so hand luggage wherever possible, but not for that length of time. So I had to come up with ways of doing all of these different legs. Now, this caused a bit of controversy. I think people maybe thought I was going to drive more miles than I could, for multiple reasons, in fact, but the fundamental one being that I wasn't traveling on my own, so I didn't have a way to do this. The second one being the rules imposed on me by the bank who had funded the car in the first place. Of course, being financed, this meant that I needed to kind of respect their wishes to not put some crazy amounts of miles on it. Now, I did actually still drive it 3,000 miles during that trip, which for a new Ford GT is up there with the most. My car sits on about 7,000 miles now at home, which I believe in Europe, outside of Ford's own media cars, is probably right up there, if not the highest mileage GT that they've delivered so far, which is quite a cool title, I guess, for the car. But it meant that for driving around, I had to be conscious of luggage restrictions and mileage restrictions. So the last thing I wanted to do was sit on highways for 500 miles, 1,000 miles for no major exciting driving, no particularly exciting moments. So I really carefully planned this out in advance, having spent months and months looking forward to the Ford GT trip, making sure I knew exactly where I was going to be going, when I was going to be going there, and working out exactly which roads I wanted to drive. For example, up the Pacific Coast Highway towards Monterey Car Week, through Death Valley on the way over to Las Vegas, taking part in a number of different events like Palm Beach Cars and Coffee and driving with a convoy. So making sure that I was optimizing my available mileage, but also optimizing the legs and how we were going to do it. And we had suitcases going in everything from rally support trucks to photographers who joined, taking bags with us, to obviously having to transport the car and sending luggage with the transporter along the way, to some legs where some things would go here. We would leave bags in different cities because we were flying left, right, and centre. You know, I'd arrived in New York. As it happens, initially, my car actually had developed a fault in transport. One of the brake lights had gone out, which was a much more complicated situation than you would think. Being an American car back here in America, that should be easy to fix. No. American cars have red blinkers for the taillights. European cars have amber blinkers for the taillights. So we actually had to get a tail light expedited from Europe back over to America, while I then flew a few days after being in New York over to Los Angeles to go to the launch of the new Corvette C8. My car went to the Ford dealer with luggage in it while I was traveling without. For me to come back, they delivered it back to me and off we go again, all ready, set and prepared. But it took a lot of logistics to pull all of this together, to make it all work, and to ensure that everything always ended up in the right place. Before the trip, I had thought about doing something extreme, perhaps installing a roof box up on top where we could take everything without any problems. But then I wanted to go to some racetracks and drag races and things. And while it's very, very, very cool as a short-time thing, or maybe for a rally, to put a roof box on a supercar. In fact, as somebody who used to ski a lot, the idea of a ski rack on a supercar is just unbelievably epic. When you're actually going to be using it all the way through and it's not just a 1 week, 2 week event, I figured that would almost be so much of a hindrance that it wasn't going to be an option that we could live with. I also considered, do I get somebody to come with me the whole way and we do the whole thing with a support car? But you do end up driving a lot of miles with not a huge amount necessarily happening along the way. And this actually just was a really convenient way to do it. You know, my car visited all of the places I wanted it to go, up the West Coast to Chicago. I took it to Detroit, obviously the home of Ford. I took it down the East Coast to a number of different stops, Philadelphia, New York, and obviously down in Florida as well. And ultimately got to effectively travel around the country. Didn't do a stupid amount of miles, learned a lot along the way, and to be honest, with some of these legs, we had some pretty entertaining moments. For example, when I would call an Uber to come and meet us with the car so we could drive in the car, and the Uber would take the luggage, and of course the Uber driver needs to make sure that you're not setting them up for something strange. So there we would be, sat at the side beside the car with our luggage, opening it all up to show the Uber driver that these are genuinely clothes and the things we've accumulated on the trip that we need to move on to the next hotel. And in fact, that actually happened right here in Ed's driveway at VINwiki. One thing that I knew would happen is that being here in the US with a UK license plate on the back and the front of the car is that people wouldn't necessarily know what that was, and in particular the police wouldn't know what that was. And true to expectations, within a matter of days at the start of my visit in New York City, in Manhattan, in fact right alongside Central Park, I had my first pulling over experience, my first time being pulled over in the USA, so I didn't really know exactly how this was going to go. I was all prepared with my documentation, my import documents, all the carnet, everything that basically said the car's allowed to be here so long as I'm here, and it goes within 12 months. That's the maximum you're allowed as a visiting car under its home registration. The New York policeman comes up to the window and he says, "Why are you driving with no tags? Where are your tags?" As if, you know, what is this yellow plate on the back? I mean, New York plates are yellow, but they don't look the same as a UK one. And of course, I proceeded to explain that I was from the UK. I'd brought my car over, but again, where are your tags? You can't drive. It's illegal to drive around with no tags on the car, until I produced all the documents and he went away and looked through all of the paperwork, and all was well, of course. My next experience with the police was something completely different, down in Miami, and I think this says a bit of the attitudes of different places around the US, from New York being very, very strict. In Miami, the question was effectively, do you have the documents and is that legal? To which I said yes, and the guy was like, okay, off you go. That was right on Ocean Drive. I thought, yeah, that fits what I might expect in Miami. The third and final time that I was pulled over was in San Francisco. We were heading over towards the Golden Gate Bridge, and we saw the police officer go past. We saw him look back at the car, quickly turned on the lights, flipped the UE, and came straight after. And I was almost ready to pull over before he even did the U-turn. It's like, I know this is coming. But the really interesting thing for me as a visitor of the experience in San Francisco was that the first thing the police officer asked was obviously, where are your tags? And then I said, it's a British car imported here temporarily. He was immediately like, can you explain it to me? How does that work? I'm really curious. And I thought that fit so well with the kind of tech generation, tech idea. And I had these 3 cliche police experiences around the country, all fine, all well, no trouble, no tickets in the entire time I was over here, but just a really interesting experience.
Off the Record can help you find a speeding ticket or traffic citation no matter where you get it. You just download their app, take a photo of your ticket, and they match you with the best local attorney to achieve the best possible outcome. They can help you avoid costly insurance premium increases, points on your license, and other issues. And when you register, use the code VINwiki for a discount on their services. If you don't have a ticket that you need to fight right now, go ahead and download their app and register using the VINwiki code, and that will reserve your discount for whenever you might need it in the future. It's a great thing to have in your pocket when you never know who's going to pull up behind you on your next road trip.